Hey everybody, this is Tony, Tainted Lord A7, and I'm finally back with a new video for 2026. I know it's been a while since my last video, but this time I have a collection update. So I'm going to start 2026 off with a new collection update video for this year. Yep, nothing big, nothing gigantic, just a solid collection update. So let's go straight to it. The first CD I'm going to show off is from a band that I'm pretty sure everybody knows, and this is definitely one of the better albums in the early discography, and that's Decapitated's Winds of Creation. I don't think Decapitated needs any introduction if you're into some Polish death metal, but Winds of Creation is just a really ferocious, aggressive, and a classic death metal album in this band's discography. I never picked up any of the older material. I only have the later stuff, so it's nice to pick up a older reissue of of the more classic albums in this band's discography. But yeah, if you want some fast, ferocious, solid death metal that's angry and aggressive, I say definitely pick up Decapitated's Winds of Creation. Definitely one of the best albums in the discography, and it's nice to pick up a reissue of Decapitated's Winds of Creation. So yeah, just a really solid album from this band, and really glad to pick up some early Decapitated albums. So yeah, Decapitated's Winds of Creation, really excellent stuff. Okay, next up is another classic album from a long running band that's keeping thrash metal alive and well. And that band and album is Overkill's Horoscope. Yeah, I don't think Overkill needs any introduction. They're like one of the most consistent, solid US thrash metal bands that's still going on and putting very solid thrash metal bangers, and they never put out any bad albums. As far as I know, they're just a really consistent band when it comes to some aggressive, in your face US thrash metal. But it's good to pick up a older reissue of the more older classic albums. So yeah, Overkill's Horoscope is just a classic thrash metal album from the early '90s that shows some heaviness and some aggressiveness, and obviously some thrashiness as well. So yeah, I don't think this album needs any introduction if you're into some solid, well done thrash metal. And it's good to pick up some older Overkill releases. So yeah, Overkill's Horoscope, just an amazingly good, excellent, flawless thrash metal album from this band, and definitely an essential album for anyone who wants to get into some thrash metal. So yeah, Overkill's Horoscope, really good stuff, and I'm really glad to pick up this reissue. Okay, next up is another um classic album from a long running band, and that's Testament's Demonic. Now, I wanted this album is not considered like a major essential classic from Testament. I think Demonic from Testament is a pretty overlooked album. I find this album to be really enjoyable, thrashy, and definitely has some groovy moments on this album to my ears. And I'm just not sure why most Testament fans look down upon this album. I don't think it's that horribly bad. I mean, it's not going to beat out the classics, but for what it is, it's actually a pretty decent album, pretty good album, and does have its very thrashy moments here and there. But overall, I think Testament's Demonic is a overlooked album in their discography. But I'm really glad to pick up some older Testament albums, and I'm really glad to pick up this overlooked gem of an album, at least to my ears. So, yeah, Testament's Demonic. Just a pretty good thrash metal album from the 90s that I personally enjoy. So yeah, Testament's Demonic. Pretty good stuff in what if you ask me. Okay, the next two albums are from the same artist, and I don't think this metal singer needs any introduction. Okay, the first one is Ozzy Osbourne's Ozzy Osbourne's Black Rain. Of all the Ozzy Osbourne albums, I think Black Rain is the one that is one of the few Ozzy Osbourne albums that I'm not that familiar with, outside of just one song, which is the first single off this album, which is I Don't Want to Stop, which to me is the most famous song off this album that I know of. But overall, Black Rain is actually a pretty good heavy metal album. It's not going to beat out his 80s solo stuff, not by a long shot, but in terms of recent, more modern day Ozzy Osbourne albums, Black Rain is surprisingly pretty good. Just a solid heavy metal album, and definitely a bit of an overlooked album, but I personally enjoy it, and I'm really glad to pick up some more Ozzy Osbourne albums that I'm not that familiar with. So yeah, Black Rain from Ozzy Osbourne, a surprisingly pretty good album from him. From him, and then the next Ozzy Osbourne album is Osmosis. Now this album is really divisive, but to my ears, this album sounds more of a hard rock album than a heavy metal album. While it does have its heavy metal moments, I feel like this album leans more towards the hard rock side and more of the mainstream appeal. But I think Ozzy Osbourne's Osmosis is actually a pretty good album. I don't think it should I don't think it should be looked down as a sellout album, as I've heard Aussie fans refer to this album as. But I think this is not a bad album. It's more of a hard rock album. It's more of a hard rock album than a heavy metal album. And while it is more mainstream, this album is actually pretty good, and I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I initially thought. And Ozzy Osbourne's Osmosis is just it's just a hidden gem in his discography that I think more fans should really appreciate now that he's, passed on. But yeah, Ozzy Osbourne's Osmosis is a pretty good album, and I'm really glad to pick this up. So yeah, Ozzy Osbourne's Osmosis. A pretty good album from a legend of the metal scene. And the last Ozzy Osbourne related release that I picked up is a classic heavy metal album, and the one that created heavy metal in the first place. But for some reason, I never had this until now, so I'm glad I already changed that, and that's Black Sabbath and their self-titled album. Yeah, this album needs no introduction. This is just a classic heavy metal album that created heavy metal in the first place. This is a landmark album that started a whole genre that's still being played and cherished to this day. And yeah, Black Sabbath's self-titled album is needs no introduction. Everybody knows this album, knows that this is a heavy metal classic, while also incorporating a lot of doom metal moments to create that moody and foreboding atmosphere, at least to my ears. But yeah, this album really doesn't need any more introduction. Like everyone has talked about them. I mean, talked about this album a whole lot, and all I'm just gonna say is that I finally picked up Black Sabbath's self-titled album. It's about damn time I did. So yeah, really glad to pick up Black Sabbath's self-titled album. Just a classic album. Everybody should know this, and everybody should definitely own it. Okay, just let me get a drink. Okay, the next one is from a band that initially I thought they were kind of silly and kind of ridiculous, but the more time I listen to this album, the more I've grown to appreciate them as musicians. And that's The Darkness and the debut album Permission to Land. Yeah, this band can be really silly and ludicrous, and the singing can be a little bit high pitched and over the top. But if you just concentrate on the actual musicianship, this is actually a solid hard rock and I say heavy metal album. Like as silly and ridiculous as this album and the band themselves can be, the musicianship and songwriting is actually pretty damn good. Like they definitely has some really solid riffs and solos, and it's just a really fun, enjoyable hard rock. Yeah, a fun, enjoyable hard rock heavy metal album that shouldn't be taken too seriously. This is just like a fun party album that you just want to play and just have a good time and get lost in the music. And yeah, The Darkness Permission to Land is actually a very fun, exciting hard rock album and heavy metal album. And I'm really glad to, you know, pick this up at my local thrift store. Oh, now that I have a more mature, oh, now that I have a more mature mind, I've grown to appreciate this album and this band a lot more. And yeah, this is just a really good hard rock heavy metal album, and definitely a band that I think people should give this band another chance if they're put off by its absurdness and silliness and just concentrate on the actual musicianship. It's really good stuff. So yeah, really glad to pick up The Darkness Permission to Land. A really good debut album from this UK band. Okay, and the last CD that I picked up for this collection update is Finger Eleven's Them versus You versus Me. Now, Finger Eleven started off like, well, I mean, as Finger Eleven, they started off as like an um, alternative rock new metal band, but but on this album, they definitely ditched the whole new metal aspect and concentrated on being more of a alternative rock, mainstream rock band. And while this album is nowhere near as heavy as the um as albums like The Greatest of Blue Skies or Tip, this is actually a really fun and enjoyable mainstream album that I personally enjoy. Um yeah, I really don't see anyone being really into this album if you're into some mainstream alternative rock, but for what it is, I think it's fun, it's enjoyable, and definitely brings me a little bit of nostalgia during my teenage years. So yeah, just a solid mainstream alternative rock album from Canada. So yeah, Finger Elevens, them versus you versus me. Um, if you're into some like you know mainstream radio friendly alternative rock, borderline pop rock album, this might be a thing, but for anyone else, I guess you could pass on this. But I don't know, I enjoy it for what it is. So yeah, Finger Elevens, them versus you versus me. Definitely a bit of a nostalgic album for me, but I thought it was a fun album. And that's it, everyone. That's my collection update that I picked up recently. Hopefully, everyone enjoys it. And let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. So, thanks for watching and goodbye.